Okay. Okay.
All right, so we're ready to proceed?
Yes.
All right, I'll kick us off. I'm Lisa Thompson, General Manager VS, and I'm a co-lead on the workforce with Jen Zukowski, who's also a key member of ES's work management team and very actively involved in workforce leadership. So I'll kick us off on our agenda for today. We have an hour. You folks are all busy people, so we'll try and make an efficient use of your time. What you have in front of you, we should be able to see on the screen. If you're not able to see it, raise your hand on the little cue that's at the bottom, but I can see it, so I'm going to assume everybody else can. This is our general approach to setting up an agenda, and it's called the ORS: Outcomes, Agenda, Rules, and Roles. And at our last meeting, we did have someone ask specifically if we could be sure that we get outcomes recorded on our meetings. So I'm going to run us through the agenda, and then we'll get started. So welcome, everybody. This is our second meeting. And we're going to start off with our agenda review. So I'm going to run through the ORs, and then we're going to go to an agenda item focused on identifying our top concerns or priority needs relative to the workforce. And we've got a specific framework we're going to use for that. And then before we close the meeting out, we'll make sure we're clear on what the next steps are, and we will adjourn. So I've introduced myself and Jen, and I also want to introduce Susan Taylor, who's my assistant, and she's going to help us with note-taking and timekeeping. So as a timekeeper, she's going to keep track of the available time, and as the meeting proceeds, she will alert the group against progress against the remaining time. So if we're looking to, like, we're going over, she'll alert us so that we can make adjustments and plans. And so when necessary, she may raise the question about changing the agenda if it appears we need more time for an item than we originally planned. These sessions, as you've heard probably at the previous meetings and are aware of, they're all being recorded. So if you need to go back and listen to something, or if you miss a meeting, you'll be able to listen to the recording. But we also think it's important for us to have a way to visually capture the key takeaways and action items. So our outcomes and actions that we need to be paying attention to for the next meeting. And so we're on that in terms of the best way to try and do that virtually. We've got a tip on some technology, but our IT folks aren't ready to immerse us in that, but they're very close. So stay tuned. We'll have something worked out by our next meeting. A little bit about the rules and proceedings. They're pretty typical. We do ask, though, in the virtual that you turn your camera on when speaking, if that's possible. It gives us a little bit more familiarity and also helps us focus on the message that you're sharing with us. I think the rest is pretty straightforward. I will say that one of the approaches to our meetings that I'd like to try is something called a go-around. And that's basically to ensure that there's an opportunity for everyone to comment. It's real easy when you're off camera, you don't have any visible signs that someone looks like they really have something to say. So we want to make sure that we create the best opportunity for everyone to kind of check in. So it'll always be optional, you can pass, but I envision that we would run through the roster of attendees and give everybody a chance to speak. And if we do a go around, we'll set it up with, here's what we want you to reflect on or comment, so focus, and give you some suggested time so we can manage how much we have available on our agenda for that. And then when it's your turn, if you would just state your name, especially if you were going to be off camera, and stay within the time frame as best you can, and give us your reflections and comments. But then when you're done, if you would say you're complete, we can shave off some of that airtime between one person finishing and the next person starting. So it just helps us know when you're done with your message. See, what else haven't I covered? At this point, it'd be good to ask people if anyone has anything they want to comment on the agenda before we would move into identifying workforce and culture focus areas. So I'll take a break quickly and give people a chance to comment or raise any suggestions they might have on the agenda, or even how we support the process of our meetings and time together.
Yes, so at this time, if anybody has anything to add, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, I will call on you in the order I see you pop up. And I do not see any hands raised at this time. Cello, do you see anything?
No.
No hands, no hands.
Okay. No hands. So at this time, Lisa, do you want to consider the agenda approved and we can move forward?
Yes, let's move to our identify workforce and culture focus areas. So while Susan's queuing up, there's a visual for this. While Susan's queuing that up, or whoever's doing the visuals at this stage, this is intended to give us kind of a framework so we all can kind of begin to see bucket potentials, you know, where we're thinking about things. And what I thought we could do is if everybody would come up with 1 to 2 in each area, that's a particular concern or a challenge, or it could even be that you feel that you've got a really great best practice going because it's making a positive difference with your work, but it will help us as a group decide which areas we're going to focus on, because this is a pretty broad topic, as you can see from the framework. So we've looked at it in the aspect of the life cycle of an employee. You hire them, there's a development, there's a management piece, and there's a support piece. And so from that standpoint, the 4 blocks identify areas that we could divide our focus and work in. So workforce staffing would be one. And for ES, I would say that talent sourcing and recruiting strategies has been a key focus of ours for the past several years and will continue to be. That would be an area that I think is important for us to focus on. And I feel like if we just did some go-arounds, and if you do one at a time and we can keep going around till we run out of focus ideas and areas. And then from there, we can decide how we're going to trim that down if we have more than we can tackle, or put them in order of priority.
Okay, thank you. Anybody that would like to share anything, go ahead and raise your hand and I will call on you. We'll start with Mert.
All right, thank you, Susan. Good morning, everyone. I had something just to get the conversation going, but feel free to build upon it or move on to something else. So I would say, I've been with the Portland Water Bureau for about 1.5 years now, and one thing I noticed is that our team is basically, our head count is 6. And we had to, I think recruit, I think it may have been about 6 people basically for the same position during that time. People come in, either they get, another opportunity within my organization or within the city in general, and they move on, or they get another opportunity externally and they leave for that. I was super surprised that there was so much movement, and I think some of it is because we've had a lot of retirements and we have a lot of people eligible for retirement right now. Kind of like, I think there was basically hardly any movement for like 2 generations, and all of a sudden it's like a cascade event. Just wanted to throw it out there as, again, a conversation starter, and also maybe discuss if, that itself has caused some challenges to everybody else. Thank you. That was my comment. I'm complete now.
Thank you. Cello, you are up next.
Perhaps maybe somebody wants to respond to what Mert said, and I can wait with my comment just to, broaden the discussion a bit, because I know that I'm going to forget what Mert said. So while it's still fresh.
Frederick?
Hey, yeah, so I'll jump in. So I'm relatively new. I'm with Loudon Water here in Northern Virginia, and looking at this graph, it makes complete sense. And I've been here 6-7 months now, and haven't really been in the office. So again, not to use that as an excuse to not get as acclimated, but I see that our main challenge is really kind of going across the board. Now, I'm hired in to really focus on the workforce development piece, right? Leadership development, learning development, succession planning. So it really goes from the workforce development over to workforce management. I don't necessarily see these things to be a challenge, as much as there's something that we've never had before me being hired. So, that's what we're working on. But I also see some challenges on the staffing, area as well, where it seems we have some struggle from a management leadership perspective, understanding, the most optimal way to staff an organization. There tends to be we have a position and we have a need, and we just need to fill it with someone who can hit the ground running, right? As opposed to looking across the board to see someone from another department that may have similar skill set or competencies, right? That are some of the key competencies that can make it work, but you need to kind of train the person up. Because when you just kind of look for someone from the outside, and this what we call ready made, they are already been trained, but then they're going to ask for more money, or from a private sector, they tend not to want to come over to a public utility. So I think it's going to be a challenge to get the management to kind of a new paradigm in terms of workforce staffing to be the most optimal way. So.
Okay, thank you. So if you could lower your hand, Frederick. Cello, you are up next.
Yeah. So I think this slide is really useful, because it made me, it gave me an opportunity to decompose that's sort of part of Western culture. You have a tough problem, you break it into little pieces. So, but it allowed me to look at all the different dimensions related to workforce. And as I'm looking at it, I'm sort of thinking about different things. It seems to me that sometimes the employee gets exposed to different people as they move through this kind of cycle. And I also think that to focus on the whole thing in this effort would be, kind of a challenge. And we have some folks on this team who are sort of working in HR departments, and I see like the stuff on the right side, job analytics, workforce planning, and talent sourcing, screening and selection, that they, at least in the utility that I work, they have a very important role, but their role sort of seems to diminish as you go through this cycle. And then on the blue, on the workforce management, it's really folks who are trying to get the work done who have to deal with the workforce issues. So it is very, very useful. And I think that what may be helpful is if this chart is used to see where people are, which one of the, do you deal with all of these issues? Do you deal with some of these issues? Where is your focus in the organization? What kind of things, where are your pain points? What kind of things are you trying to address? And I see that Layla has a hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was just about to call on her when you were complete, Cello. Are
Yeah.
you complete? Are you complete, Cello?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Layla, you are on deck.
Hi, morning all. So my comment was just mainly around, I think it kind of follows what Cello was saying on where we're sort of focused. And I don't work in sort of HR within our program. I sort of mainly focus around the organizational culture things and make sure, I think one of the key challenges for me in my work is making sure everybody understands how they fit into the bigger picture, and how their day-to-day tasks fit into a wider program, and how if they don't get them done on time, for example, how it has a knock-on effect to other people, and just how to make sure everyone so connects to the sort of vision and values and how everything builds up. So a big challenge for me is to make sure when we get new staff in that they have sort of an induction and understand where they fit within a bigger picture and why we're asking people to do certain tasks on a monthly basis, or why we're asking them to look at these training courses and things like that. So that's one of the challenges I think would be useful to focus on, is for everyone to be on the same page within the organization. I'm complete.
Okay, thank you, Layla. And Cello, did you have anything else you wanted to say, or did you want to lower your hand?
I was going to lower my hand, but I just had a thought that hit me. And I know that Scott is worried. Whenever thoughts hit me, he gets a worried look on his face. What I think would be helpful for me is if we took all of these things that are here, the 16 things that are here, and put them in a spreadsheet. And when the first column in the spreadsheet, are these things, these 4 categories. And then we had a RACI matrix. We had a matrix of different roles in the organization. I would be interested to see what is the level of involvement from HR, from a project manager, from a senior manager. What is their involvement, a role, how do they map to these things? It would be really interesting to see. I was just wondering, Elisa and Jen, you are the ones, do you have something like this? Because when I look at this, I'm thinking, how are these things, what do people do? How do roles in the organization map against these things?
I think I can start maybe. So this model, actually, prior to restructuring our organization, there were staff that specifically worked on staffing. There were people that worked on workforce development. There were managers and some people working on workforce management as well as organizational culture. And sometimes it overlapped with the same people, and sometimes people that were in that one bucket. And so I think we realized we had to take a step back and figure out what was the old model and what's the new model in a way that can help us utilize the resources and the people and the talent that are already there, but be able to do it on this continuum. And so we recently had a reorg where our workforce and equity are built into the same unit instead of being under one area. So they kind of got pushed down and down low in the work. And so now we do have still that same group of people, and potentially looking at where can we bring in more resources to elevate those areas. But just in seeing, I think we've been working at this new structure for a little over a month now, maybe. I mean, I've seen my staff just really gravitate to, as we're staffing, how can we think about diversity and inclusion? What does our hiring process look like? What's the transformational change that we need to go through to make sure as we bring someone into the organization, they feel welcome, they feel included, they also have an idea of their development, they can see us long term. So you really have to make sure that you have the capacity and that you have people, and then it doesn't just fall within this group. We have cross division teams, and we have people that help with this work. So they may be an engineer, for example, but they're still giving feedback and input on our equity and inclusion by being on one of our workforce, our organizational culture teams. And I'm out.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Scott, you have your hand raised, and then Frederick.
Yes, I was just kind of going to comment on what I've heard so far. And what I've heard so far are that rather than identify the specific details within those 4 different categories, that different people have expressed interest. Like Mert said, he was interested in workforce development and workforce management. We heard from Layla that she was interested in organizational culture. And as we know, there's another group also that is dealing with organizational culture. So I was wondering, thinking of Lisa's agenda, if maybe finding if there were people who was interested in which of these major categories, and then Lisa, you might have had some thoughts about how to organize work around those, but rather than going at the more granular level, maybe just, taking each of those 4 areas. And organizational culture, as Jen was just saying, and even the way that Lisa started out with talent sourcing and recruiting strategies, there seems to be a relationship, for example, of talent sourcing and recruiting strategies with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So while this isn't the organizational culture team, there can be impacts of organizational culture in relation to the other 3 items. So I'll just say complete.
Thank you, Scott. Frederick, and then Lisa.
Lisa, do you want to respond to what Scott said? Transition.
Real quick, I totally open. I mean, I think at this stage, we're trying to figure out where we can have the most effective way of doing this work. And then to Scott's comment on culture, I think it is important that we keep culture in mind, even when we're thinking about our workforce staffing, our workforce development, and workforce management, because it's all interwoven. And I really think that rethinking all of those 3 areas relative to the kind of culture change and shift society's going through and organizations need to be going through is really key to this. So on the talent sourcing and recruiting strategies, for example, it was an HR responsibility to go do the job fairs and do the recruiting, and we just weren't having results until we engaged our workforce within environmental services to be much more a partner and actively involved in the recruitment process. That was a paradigm shift culture change for our HR folks to look at, wait a minute, you mean we're not doing that? You guys are going to do that? And of course, there was a partnership, but it was primarily became staff that weren't HR professionals that made the biggest impact for us in that change. So that's just to illustrate the culture, I think, is interwoven in all of these. I'm complete.
Thank you, Lisa. Scott, did you have an additional comment, or did you need to lower your hand?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll lower my hand.
Thank you. Frederick, you are next.
Thanks. Oh, by the way, you can just call me Fred. Only my mother
Fred.
calls me Frederick. I'm in trouble. So, anyway,
I'll remember that.
Yeah, thanks. I was actually had my hands raised to kind of go back to answering Cello's question. Just the race key for these areas. For me, the HR piece. It's for workforce development, management, and culture. We're both responsible and accountable. And we're talking a little bit about the workforce staffing. That's the area where I think, for us, HR is a relatively small team. We only have, 330 employees, and the HR team consists of really the HR director, who also has facilities and security and miscellaneous, things under him as well. So his, full focus isn't just on HR. And, I've got the learning development piece, and culture piece, workforce management, and then we've got a benefits person and also I would say HR coordinator that does everything else. But we really don't have anyone for the workforce staffing. We're more on the support, side at best, where we just essentially doing the administrative piece of it, and the management, they are pretty much taking that full on. So I think, there are some things from HR standpoint, our structure that, I will look to, influence and try to recommend some additional HR engagement, because that does impact everything else on this, circle right here. As Lisa said, this is all relative, and all starts with, staffing. But right now for our structure, we're responsible, accountable for the others, but not the workforce staffing. I'm complete.
Okay, thank you, Fred. So I want to give an opportunity to Tanya or Zonetta to share anything that they might have on their minds as well, so that we can hear all the voices. If you have anything to say, let us know. You can just raise your hand and we will get you to speak up. Scott.
Well, maybe I think maybe Cello was a step or two ahead, and what I'm going to say is, maybe preempts a bit where Lisa might want to go, but it kind of sounds like this is good sharing, and maybe we ought to have more sharing. But looking ahead, if we took these different areas and we basically between now and the time of the next meeting, we identified one who was interested in pursuing each of those four areas, if they wanted to specialize a bit and be on part of a work team, for that. But also, if we had a racy matrix where if it was an area of interest where you could kind of provide, just by putting an X or something next to different organizational elements of your organization, of who's responsible, accountable, involved in or consulting, for those items. And then Lisa, you might also want to comment, there could be some underlying organizational characteristics that are overriding characteristics on how the organization operates relative to to staffing and participation and stuff. Maybe it's premature to get there. Maybe that's more of a conclusion that we reach later, but I was just trying to help tee up some next steps so that we could kind of move this forward and get specific areas and people engaged.
So
complete.
Thank you, Scott. You can lower your hand. And Lisa, you are up.
So I'll just recap and correct me if I didn't catch this right, but we're basically going to provide a RACI type diagram for all of our participants that between now and the next meeting, they could go and indicate their greatest interest or where they have interests, and we can begin to populate the the RACI diagram around this framework. And the last piece that you were referring to, Scott, is that maybe on that RACI diagram, we have a spot for other comments so that those related things that people think of as they're covering whatever their focus topic input RACI diagram, that could be captured and we can come back later and explore those cross-connecting implications. Is that fair? Give me a thumbs up or do a friendly amendment so that we can capture what it is we want to have for takeaway action.
Yeah, I would just add, Lisa, maybe doing the go around to just get a response to that. I'm kind of wondering, going back to Mert's first comment, if that, kind of works, in his situation and for everybody else too.
So I'll also add, this is where if we had some visible note taking, we'd be able to see in front of us, all of us, that this is what we're talking about, for actions and looking for your feedback on. So I think that will be helpful when we get to get our capabilities where we want them to be on that. But yes, let's do a quick go around and basically, what are your thoughts on that approach? Do you have any suggestions for modifications, or are you feeling comfortable with what's been proposed? And I will yield the floor to whoever wants to step up. Thank you.
Okay, if you would like, go ahead and raise your hand and share your thoughts. The floor is open for the go around. Fred and then Layla.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree with that approach. I'm complete.
Thank you. Layla?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think that's a sensible approach if we sort of look at who might be responsible and who might be best placed to discuss the different topics, and then everyone indicate which section they're sort of leaning towards or have more knowledge of that they could share. Then I think that'd be really helpful ahead of the next meeting. And if we need to set up smaller groups to focus in on certain areas, then I think that would be useful as well. I'm complete.
Thank you. Mert?
Yeah, I would say I definitely have my sort of prioritized areas of interest here. I'm not feeling necessarily comfortable to lead any one of these discussions because I'm pretty new when it comes to larger scale workforce management activities, but I'm okay with the approach and hoping to give whatever time I can to it to make it work between everything else that's going on in our lives, of course. But do you want us? Quick question to Scott. Scott, did you want us to also comment on our areas of interests now, or is that something we will just do with when the matrix or the chart is?
Well, Lisa could comment here, but not everybody who's part of the team is on the call. So I think that if we give the opportunity to everyone who's on the team within the we define to, a few issues. One is, what are areas of interest that you want to, be involved in? Secondly, what does a basic RACI matrix in those areas of interest look like for you? And then third, if there's something that you would like to share relative to these to a group. Mert, you're saying you're not particularly qualified, but of course we know you are qualified. So, but if there's an area of interest that you might want to share at the next meeting in an area going through your RACI matrix, or either your as is, what you have now, or what you would like to see, either one or both, that could be, a potential agenda item too.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, in terms of content to share right now. I gotta do a little bit of thinking on that, but there's definitely some areas that, at least from my perspective, are more important than others in what I do. So
Sure.
I'll I'll keep that in mind, and then we'll maybe just absorb everybody's comments through the matrix, and then it may take another meeting or two, I think, to sort of put a structure around our approach.
I just have to hop in and say, I think Einstein has some really good quotes out there that all his great ideas didn't just come from his own thinking. It was a collection of different comments and inputs, and many of them stemmed from things that people thought were not all that significant or important, but they were that missing piece that brought another idea forward. So I think the better together is what this group is all about, because I know we're doing different things. We've been challenged in different ways, and we all together will learn from each other.
Great, thank you. I was complete as well, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I don't see any other hands raised, and wanted to do a quick time check. We have about 10 minutes left in this segment. So Lisa, I am thinking turn it over to you for your next thoughts.
Well, I think we've got the next steps for the group. The assignment that we'll have, and you'll be receiving some materials after the meeting. If you could engage with that request for input, that would be great. I guess for the folks that missed the meeting, we'll have to try and see if we can make sure that they're clear what's being asked of them. So maybe Scott, and I think Cello's now off, but maybe Scott, you can help me with that to make sure we get everybody able to engage with this, so that as we go forward, we'll begin to pick up some momentum. And then I guess we're ready to close out, and I like to close out a meeting. Well, do I see somebody's hand? Scott, you want to?
I was just gonna comment, Lisa, that what we haven't talked about, and we didn't need to talk about, but just to keep in the back of our mind that it's part of our overall effort, is once we basically take these areas and say, let's just say where we aspire to be, you know, what does what does the literature, or where are good examples that can be used to help us get there? A second thing would be, how do we assess where we are relative to that area? And the third is there a maturity type of scale or evaluation that's appropriate that could be used in that area? We're not dealing with that right now. We're on an earlier step, but if it might give us the complete idea of where we want to get to as in terms of an ultimate deliverable from the group.
Very good suggestion. Yeah, while we're doing the other, we might as well have those questions on our framework so that we can get started thinking of that as well. All right. Any other comments before we go to closing out the meeting and adjourning?
I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so does anybody have something they would like to offer in terms of what they would like us to do differently or better next time in terms of supporting the meeting? Or what they thought went well, so that we know what to do more of and maybe what we could do better differently next time. I'll give everybody a chance to possibly comment.
Fred.
Yeah, I really like the visual, Lisa. I think that helps move the conversation along, and to not get off track. People can just refer back to the visual on the comments. So I like that.
Okay.
Thank you. Zonetta.
Oh, I just wanted to just echo what Fred just said. I love the visual here. I think it ties it all together. I think we're a little afraid of the overlap, but I think it'll be all right once we get some deliverables that we want to do. And I think that'll help everybody get kind of focused, because it seems very overwhelming right now, but I think it'll flush out when we make some decisions on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Zonetta. Any other comments at this time? So Zonetta, if you want to lower your hand. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the comments. And if it's helpful, that feeling of overwhelm, I share that too. It's a lot to try and wrap our arms around, and it all seems really important right now. So I'm really happy that you are all interested in helping us sort some of this out and be able to share with each other best ways of being as an organization going forward. So with that, I think we are ready to adjourn. And